Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Zebra Talk, the podcast where we shine a little light onto the lives and the untold stories of the people who slide on their knees and count the threes. That's right, I'm talking about the referees. And today we're joined by one of my oldest friends in professional wrestling because he was my friend before professional wrestling. This is a guy that I've known since high school, since
Yeah.
Alhambra High School, Martinez, California. Represent what?
Yes,
you've
sir.
you've seen him at Hoodslam, you've seen him at Best of the West. Please give a warm welcome that we can't actually hear because this is pre-recorded to Wiggles Shane Wignall. How you doing, Wiggles?
What's up, everybody? I'm awesome. I'm doing really good. I'm happy to be here with you. And yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the Alhambra thing because like that's actually something that I think about. Like we were the nerdy kids in school, and like we were with the drama department, all other stuff, and people would always kind of like, oh, you watch wrestling, etc. And now I'm like, hey man, look at us now. We're having fun doing this thing, so
Right?
it's all good.
Living out our dreams, traveling all over the place, reffing crazy matches in front of all kinds of people. Speaking of crazy matches, you're the stuff that you've done. You know, obviously we kind of come from the same place, but you have gone to another level with it. But like, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Let's just dive right in. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself? Give us a little origins of who you are, where you come from, and how you got involved, got interested in wrestling. Go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. So I live in the Bay Area. I've got a dog and a house and a pretty cool job that I enjoy doing. But I would say going back to the wrestling thing, I really got interested in it when I was about, I would say like 7 or 8 years old. My buddy was watching a lot of it, and I never watched it at home. But anytime I came over to his house on the weekend, it was always on. He had all the tapes, and he was really into it. So I got into it, and then I watched it kind of regularly from about 7 till 13. Then I stopped watching, and then I got
Sure.
back into it in high school, and then thereafter just kind of kept watching. I've been lucky enough to have done it for shoot like 4 or 5 years now, off and on, obviously with everything that's happening. But I
Sure.
started training over in Oakland. As you know, you actually kind of nudged me into it.
No, I've never influenced anybody in the world of professional wrestling. I am
Okay,
completely selfish and not interested in helping anyone build a career
no,
or a future.
no, you're a jerk. Like
Yeah.
you don't do anything for anyone. You don't give anybody spotlight. You want it all on yourself. But we all have our faults. It's good.
I'm
No,
curious,
but
actually, before
yeah.
we move on too quickly, you said that there's a buddy of yours that you were introduced to wrestling through. Is this somebody
Mhm.
that like I would have met or known at any point? Is this a Martinez kid?
My
Not that
buddy
anybody here
Donovan.
is going to know
No, I
who we're
think you met.
talking to.
Have you met Donovan? My really large friend, big
Maybe.
dude, like six something. He's like
I
six
feel
four,
like I
six
would
five.
probably know if I had met him. But anyway, let's go right ahead and move on. Did you ever go to like any indie shows before you like started coming around the Hood Slam scene?
Yeah, I did. I went to who was it that ran at the Boys and Girls Club
It was
when we were
Devil
in high
Mountain
school?
Wrestling.
Devil Mountain, yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Devil Mountain was like, okay, cool. Like there's this local show, and I think I saw it like on MySpace or something.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine that Michelle knew Anton, who was working those shows, and
Right.
was like, "Hey, you should come check this out." And like, I went there, and I was like hooked on indie wrestling again just by going to one. I mean, it was just fun. You got the $3 hot dog. You're sitting in the gym with probably about 30 other people. You got
Right.
your $2 sodas, and you got your raffle tickets for the halftime raffle. And
Got to
it's
get that 50-50 raffle, brother. That
got to,
is
got
indie
to.
wrestling.
No, it
Oh
was
man.
it was so much fun though. I remember going to those shows and just making a fool out of myself and really just enjoying the live aspect of it. So, and the fact
It
that it was
was
affordable and accessible was great.
it was pretty wild. Like when I was older and like started going around the Hood Slam scene, I had totally spaced on the fact that I actually went to a Devil Mountain show when we were in high school and just forgot, I guess, because I moved away and did college and all that other stuff. But come to find out, like I had seen the twins wrestling on the show, and I'm sure Sheik and everybody else, but like they were the ones that really stood out to me, and I remembered them when I saw them do the high five and the yee thing. Like that was what
Yeah,
stood out to me more than anything from the show, which
Suburban Commandos.
just goes to show how important those like little character moments are, like I didn't remember any of the wrestling, but that's what stuck out. And it's wild that there was like independent wrestling so easily accessible to us, so close to us. Like I live, over on F Street. This is a lot of Martinez lore for people who have no
Yeah.
idea where we're talking about. But like, I lived like 5 minutes away from the Boys and Girls Club. I could have walked to these shows in high school, and I just didn't know that they were there. But anyway, let's fast forward a little bit to you coming to Hoodslam and that kind of how you got involved in the scene a little bit more regularly.
Yeah, I in between there, I did go to some like WWE shows, like went to a Raw and a SmackDown, etc. Whenever it came around, just because I kind of
Sure.
got back into it at that level, and then I went to a little show called Hoodslam, and I don't recall if it was you and I that were talking about the first one that I went to, or I just showed up. Was it me and you? Remind me.
I
I think
think that you showed up, and I had no idea you were a wrestling fan yet. I
right.
was
Okay.
already training there, but like you and I and Ryan Mulgrew and I, another Martinez person that nobody knows who we're talking
Sure.
about, but the three of us were all diehard hardcore wrestling fans at the same time and had no idea about each other, which is really
Yeah.
funny because we came up at that time where it was like almost embarrassing to be like a pro wrestling fan.
Yeah.
So nice to find out after the fact. But yeah, you came. Just I guess organically because of like Michelle and the other kids, maybe because like
Yeah.
the Martinez crew was already coming, right? Or did you bring
Yeah.
them with you?
Well, I think I brought them with me. Like I came first. I don't remember if it was with Andrew or somebody else, but regardless. And then
Mhm.
then the Martinez people started showing up. And I think what really like struck me about Hood Slam that was different from any other show was just the fact that it felt it felt more like a fun night at the bar with your friends
Yeah,
that there was also a wrestling show at.
yeah,
And
absolutely. Let's
I
talk
felt
about what Hood Slam is real quick, just to like
sure.
kind of set the scene for the people who are listening. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I would say Hood Slam is it's at its core, it's a wrestling show,
Sure.
obviously, but it's somewhat adult oriented in that there's certain notions of, I would say, old school or traditional wrestling that just don't exist there.
Right.
Um, People have been shot and killed on shows, babies have been born, aliens have come out of the sky. Just several really crazy things, and they kind of let the audience in on the joke, which is what I really appreciated about it. And
Right.
it,
It's
the
like
other thing,
intentionally tongue in cheek. It's very adult oriented. It's 21 and up. Like it's not
yes.
in any way traditional pro wrestling intentionally. Go ahead.
No, and I think me being a wrestling fan, what allowed me to really connect with it was that beneath all the crazy characters and the interesting angles and the like off the wall storylines and the comedy, there was legitimate good professional wrestling that was
Yes.
occurring there.
Yes.
And that, as a wrestling fan, really allowed me to connect with it. And if you're not a wrestling fan, you might come in and really just resonate with the other stuff like the comedy and that
Sure.
stuff. But as a wrestling fan, I got it all because I
Yeah.
feel like there were some really talented people that worked there, and it was just fun to be a part of as a fan. I really enjoyed it. Something
Which is
totally different, that's for
exactly
sure.
exactly how I felt when I first started going. It was like I've always been like a really nerdy like wrestling fan, like my favorite wrestlers are like the collegiate shoot style wrestlers, but
Yes.
like you have that at Hood Slam, but they really embrace the variety aspect of professional wrestling. They give you, all the different flavors of ice cream in one night, but they don't really exclude any of the flavors. You'll see a death match just as easily as you'll see like one of the best cruiserweight matches you've ever seen, just as easily as you'll see like this crazy off the wall, ridiculous 8-man tag with like aliens and, like you said, dead babies and zombies and yeah, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
No, I mean, I think you really summed it up there, and it was just one of those things that I found myself really enjoying as a fan, and it was just something that was totally different from anything that I had been to prior. And I think I had some further conversations with you, and I don't remember how it came up, but I think you mentioned, "Hey, I'm going to school out here in Oakland." And I'm like, "Oh, that's neat." And I said, I thought about that. That sounds like it'd be fun, but that's kind of where I had left it
Sure.
in my brain. And there was a few more conversations with you and I, and eventually it came to, hey, like, why don't you just come check out a practice? And I did. I went over to the school there with Dustin and Derek, the twins, the Suburban Commandos, whatever you want to call them. And from then on, I was just kind of there. And before
Yeah.
you know it, I was in there training, 2 or 3 times a week to start with. And I just remember one thing from when I first started. I was still so new. You weren't there for a night, so I got to do, I think, like 3 or 4 matches, and I remember being super excited and
Yeah.
telling you like, "Oh man, I got to do 3 or 4 full matches, and it was so cool," and blah blah blah. And like, I just that feeling of being excited and having fun with it, that has never left me. Every time I
Yeah,
go out, I have that same feeling, and that's what I really appreciate about what we do.
absolutely. It's funny how organic the process is and how it's very similar to like other people's situations. Like, for example, like I had been going to the Hood Slam shows and Steven Tresario, our friend, had been telling me, like, why aren't you training? Why aren't you training? Why aren't you training? Like, until eventually, like, one day we just show up to the warehouse and then we just never leave. Like, rest in peace, Victory Warehouse. Changed a lot of people's lives, man.
Yeah, definitely. And
Uh,
it's just, I think the funny conversation that I have with people, and I'm sure anybody that's listening to this can relate to this conversation that do what we do. It's like, well, how did you get into that? And in the end, it's like any other job. I went to school.
yeah.
It is what it is at its base level. That's exactly what it is.
My mom actually made a really interesting comment about like my experience in pro wrestling so far. She compared the time that we spend on the indies to like an internship or like learning trying to get your doctorate, right? You're committing a serious amount of time to learning as much as you can, like almost a decade for a lot of people,
Mhm.
before you actually get the opportunity to take what you've learned and put it into practice on like a major scale. And I really liked that comparison a lot.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I wish I would have had those words when I could have made a description to people that say, "Oh, like I bet you're making a bunch of money with all those long drives that you're doing and all those shows. Like you've been all over the place. I bet your rent is paid and everything's all taken care of from what you do." And I wish I had the words to say it's considered an internship right now.
Right.
Um,
I
but no,
mean,
I've
you can take it now. It's yours. It's yours, brother.
sure
I'll give it up to you.
I'm going to.
Tell me a little bit about your experience. I'm not looking for compliments or anything because you did a lot of your own training after I had left. Tell me a little bit about your experience training to become a referee and what the transition was like from like becoming a fan to a student to somebody who's actually working regularly in the ring.
Well, I think when I first realized that this was for real and it was going to be harder than I thought it was just doing something as simple as taking a flat back bump.
Hmm.
Um, it's something that as go to training becomes a normal everyday realistic thing that's like okay whatever it's a warm up. But I remember when I first did that and I hit the mat and I'm going like, ow,
I got to
is
do that
this,
all the time.
yeah, how much do I have to do this? And then it came to then the roles came, and I was reminded of how unathletic I am, which is kind of the origin of my name because I'm
Your
completely
moniker, if
wiggly.
you will.
Yeah, my moniker. I'm completely wiggly. I'm not athletic, but I learned the hard way, so to speak, that it is very athletic and it's a very real thing, and it requires a lot of talent and dedication to be even remotely okay at it.
Absolutely.
And I would say that was one of the biggest light bulb moments in the transition from fan to working within the business, or at least training to do so. And
Hmm.
then I know you mentioned that you weren't looking for compliments, but I will say that you were actually really helpful at the beginning because it was myself and you. We were kind of the referee camp there. That was
Yeah,
about it. So it was helpful to have you to kind of start with. And then as we both kind of grew, I felt like we were able to bounce ideas and thoughts off of each other. And I think that was really helpful as well. And that's where I I kind of learned about the nuances of the job, at least on a basic level. And going back into the transition, it was as a referee, I found myself sitting there watching as a
mhm,
fan, being like, well, that was a cool move, or that was neat. And then forgetting I was actually doing a job. Um,
mhm.
so
Which is
that was really fun.
unfortunate, but
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll tell you, like you've been there, I've been there. I've been a part of some matches that I would have loved to just sit and watch, but I'm working, which
yeah.
I feel blessed to do. But sometimes, I'm still a fan of this business, obviously, and I think we all are.
Tell me a little bit, I don't think we've ever really talked about this too much in depth, but like what was it like after I left and you kind of had to just like start teaching yourself? Like a lot of us, we've had the experience where like either we never had another referee on hand, or some people have had a referee like trainer or mentor or something. We just kind of had each other to work with. I was only like a few months ahead of you. Like I hadn't even
Yeah.
been in a year yet. What was it like just kind of like being thrown in the deep end and being the only one there?
Well, I would say that I was lucky enough to at least have some resources that I could reach out to. So there was Toby, who there was referee Guido, who
Of course.
and they were great to be able to talk to in between. But a lot of it was really just self observation, and that kind of taught me to be hard on myself because I would have to be the one correcting my mistakes or like seeing if I
Sure.
looked good or whatever. So that was actually a great exercise in learning how to tape study myself. A lot of what I would do is I would set up my phone and I would go back and watch after and make adjustments. And um, don't get me wrong, my trainers were great, but a lot of times there wasn't that referee mindset going into it.
Right.
And the feedback I was getting was, oh, you're in the way here, or you did a good job on this count, or great job. I don't
Right.
have anything for you, which is a good compliment, but I'm trying to learn. So a lot of it was really just learning to be a tough critic on myself, but a fair critic, so that it would be actual. I get some production out of it, if that makes sense.
Sure, absolutely. That's something that we talk about a lot in this podcast. Is like, we've all heard the compliment, like you weren't in the way, and that's a compliment. And like, yes, it's a compliment, and we appreciate hearing it. We're glad that we're, like meeting that like baseline requirement. But like, what we need in those moments in our early days isn't a compliment. What we need is something to help us grow and help us like get better at like the technique that people don't really observe unless they do the job. Which, like you had mentioned before, we were really lucky that we had some really experienced, talented referees that were associated with the Hoodslam company, even if they weren't necessarily at training with us all the time. So, big thank you to Sparky and Guido and Toby. And
Yeah.
yeah. Tell me a little bit about when was the first time that you actually booked on a show? How long did it take you after you had been training? And do you remember your first match?
I want to say, yeah. So I'm going to talk about something like outside of a student show. My
Yeah,
first match that I really remember, I'll say, I don't know if it was my exact first match, but the first one that I have a distinct memory of was when Hoodslam was actually in Reno. This was one of the
sure.
first times that I had the opportunity to referee, because I forget who it was, but somebody couldn't make the trek out to Reno, and
Right.
I had a chance to go out there, and I was in there thankfully with my two trainers.
Hmm.
That was the first match that I remember, and it was a tag match. And I felt like going into it, I felt like I was way in over my head, but
Hmm.
it was interesting. Once I got in there and started moving around, I just went back to all the stuff that I had trained on in front of nobody.
Yeah,
And it just kind of clicked. And I would say I didn't really have to consciously think about everything I was doing. And that was really helpful. And I got
absolutely.
some good feedback about that. Obviously I was really new, so there were a lot of things I could get better at, but that was a lot of fun. I'll never forget that. That
I
was
think
definitely the
that
first one.
really speaks to like the quality of training that you get with the twins. Because like I've spoken before about how like you get different things from different schools based on where it is that you go. And like, if you go to like all pro wrestling, you're gonna get trained to be a very, very, very good technical wrestler and
Hmm.
get like put into very good physical shape, and you're probably going to be trained like how to become a WWE wrestler or an AEW wrestler
Hmm.
or something like that, right? Like kind of the same thing with big time wrestling, BTW. You're probably gonna get trained to become like a superstar, main event style wrestler or whatever your wrestling style is. But what I'm getting at is when you're training with the twins, like they are very, very, very good at teaching people psychology. They're very good at teaching people how to become like a functional independent wrestler, referee, whatever it is. That was something that I really appreciated about being there, is like they take the time to make you do matches and matches and matches and matches over and over all the time, so that when you do get put in front of people for that first time, like you said, it's just like, oh yeah, I've done this.
Yeah, and the other thing that I'll give them credit for is they themselves are over the top characters in wrestling, and
Yeah,
that tends to be the type of character that they develop there with their students. So
yeah,
having the experience working with this extreme level of like over the top character makes it so that I guess there was not a character that I ever worked with that I was intimidated by, or
sure.
that I was like, oh, you're too much or you're too weird. I don't know how to work with you, or I just
Yeah,
never had that problem, you know? So that was one thing that I was extremely grateful for, was just the way that those guys uh, build character and really just have that over the top personality. I think that was hugely helpful for me in my career.
definitely. Okay, so you've trained, you've done your first match now, you're starting to do shows and things like that. At what point did you feel like your reffing really like kicked off and you felt like, you know, you were like hitting your kind of groove?
I would really go back to Hoodslam with this. I think about six to 8 months after I started in, I was now working on the show that I had gone to as a fan. And I think when I went out there, Hoodslam, you know, was lucky enough to sometimes draw 500-600 people in that venue. And I think
Sometimes a
just
lot more
getting
than that.
it's yes, but you
Yeah.
know, the fire marshal might tune in here, so 5 to 600.
The Fizz Air Marshal.
Yeah. But no, and I think that's really when I started hitting my stride, just when I was doing it on a monthly basis at the time. It started to be, you
Mhm.
know, every Friday I had something solid that I could count on. And from that, as you know, Hood Slam draws talent from many different circles. So it was nice to be able to have the networking there. And I got an opportunity to go work with Gold Rush a couple of times. Then I worked with
Sure.
East Bay Pro Wrestling, which, as you know, is a local promotion here. And then I went to Best of the West from there. So it was really when I started having to keep a calendar on
Mhm.
my phone to figure out what was next, that I knew that I had hit my stride, and that it was something that I could actually do on a regular basis.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Um, when did you have that moment, like, you know, you're somebody that like I think you balance real life and wrestling life a lot better than most people. It's something that I've always kind of like looked towards you for inspiration and like, you know, like how to do that myself. Um, do you consider yourself someone who's chasing a contract?
I wouldn't necessarily say somebody that's chasing a contract. I think that my ultimate goal in life is to make money doing something that I really enjoy doing.
Sure.
And I think refereeing is that thing. Like I like my day job, but I love refereeing. There's nothing like that in the world. So it is something that I put my focus and my time into. And even now, when I might not be, you know, out doing the things that we normally do, I still try to take the time to be active in Zebra Talk. Like I'm not posting a lot. I know, don't scold me for that, but I do scroll through there and I see a lot of information, and it's something that I'm trying to keep it always on my mind. But I would not consider myself somebody that's chasing a contract. No, I try to take it day by day, and I try to take each experience for what it is and
Sure.
really just enjoy the moment that I'm in, and hopefully create more as I move along.
Now, you may not be somebody who's chasing a contract, but like you've spoken about it even yourself just here. Like you feel like the thing that you want to pay your bills and like be your living and your actual career is professional wrestling and refereeing. At what point did you, you know, like obviously you can be somebody who's working the indie circuit and everything and bouncing around from show to show and show.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good hobby, but like when did you really get that like confidence that like, you know, kind of made you feel like, no, like I'm not just like doing this for fun anymore. Like I'm a worker.
It was probably the first time that I worked 4 shows in a week.
Sure.
Um, and that was, you know, I want to say about a year into my career. I think it was a student show on Thursday, a Hood Slam on Friday. I had East Bay on Saturday, and I had Best of the West on Sunday, if I recall. And that was one of those times where I was able to count the places that I've been, and really realize, like, hey, I just spent probably 40 hours doing this,
Yeah.
and I didn't like, it wasn't stressing me out. Like I
I
liked
didn't
all of
hate
it.
it.
Exactly. Like that's the way to put it. I was not miserable there. I was not at any point looking at my watch saying, oh man, okay, I got a lunch in 15 minutes. Thank goodness.
Mhm.
I was just enjoying it. You know, I had fun with the car rides. I had fun with, you know, sitting under the learning tree, as they say, and just talking to different people from different companies, and all the stuff in between. I really embraced and loved. And yeah, I think that's when I realized that it's something that I could do as a full-time job, because you know, I was doing it for 40 hours that week, and that's something that I wanted to continue doing. I'd be happy to spend my time doing it.
Yeah, it's crazy when you have that moment where like I actually didn't really have it until like maybe like my fifth or sixth year because I have been somebody who's been so gung ho focused on and chasing after a contract. Like my goal when I started refereeing, when I started training was like WWE in 5 years. which, like, I set that goal for myself intentionally, to as absurd as it was, because I didn't think that I could get there, so I wanted to see how close that I could get. But then that, like, just consumed my mind the whole time. And what I'm getting at is, like, it's wild when you have that moment where, like, you've been trying to, like, become a pro wrestling referee for so long, and then you have that self-realization moment and that reflection moment where you're like, I am a pro wrestling referee. Like, I'm not somebody who's like that was a student or a trainee or somebody that's like, doing my best to try and convince people that I am this. I am this.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think part of it too was when, and this was probably a couple of years in, where I noticed that like brand new referees were coming to me with questions.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, dude, I don't even know why you're asking me that. Like, I don't know
Like,
what I'm doing.
Sparky's right over there. Why are you talking to me?
Yeah, yeah. I'm like, I'm still winging it. I don't know why you're coming to me. And I think that kind of led into exactly what you're talking about, where you take that moment where, I'm a student and I'm learning, and like I'm trying to break into this thing to, hey, I might be in this thing now.
Yeah.
So here we are.
Obviously we're not
For
like
sure.
a vet, or like we're not,
Not at
anybody's
all.
trainer or anything like that. But there's definitely, yeah, that moment where you're like, I'm not trying to do this anymore. I am doing this. I'm
Yeah.
still learning, but I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Learning by doing. Speaking of which, you've had the fortune to have an interesting experience very early on in your career, pretty often actually, if I do say so myself. You've been a senior referee at a number of places already. You've talked about East Bay Pro Wrestling. Tell me a little bit about like what that experience has been like, for the people at home. Let's explain what East Bay is, to the people listening.
Yeah, so East Bay is a local thing. Obviously, they're I would say a smaller operation. I think they do probably 40 to 60 fans at their show when things were busy, because that's what their building could support. But it
Right.
was a place where a lot of young and up and coming talent from the area had a chance to really show their stuff every week. And the thing with East Bay that was cool is they would almost always have a full house. It would always be
Yeah.
the same fans back there. You would get to know certain people's faces. You would start to have, a little back and forth with certain fans that were there just because they were there every show, every week, every month. And it was, I guess I would call it, like a community theater version almost, where it was
Sure.
just a
It's
local group. Yeah.
it's a really good like training ground. You know what I
100%.
mean? Like there's some really big name people who like have, had their first titles there, like Shotzi had her first women's championship there. Mansoor had his first like company title, not necessarily a
Yeah.
world title or anything. Like Steven obviously had his first like company title there. It's a great place for people that like, not that there's anything wrong with booking the people that are already famous, but they were never going to book people that like are traveling in from all over the world, unless they were already in the area and they could afford it or whatever. This was a place that runs like every 2 weeks. They give you what they can. And like you said, it gives opportunities to people, like myself, like yourself, the people that we've already mentioned, a chance to really come in and like have an opportunity that they might not be able to get in other places because they haven't established themselves yet, to have a storyline and develop their character and to have like lengthy matches instead of, like maybe just going and doing a dark match. There's nothing wrong with that, but like you can't really learn from that if that's all that you're ever getting.
Yeah, no, and I think for me it was a great exercise in learning some of those different flavors that we were talking about with professional wrestling. I had come from Hoodslam, which, as we talked about several times, it was crazy, over the top, wacky, just totally over the top stuff. And then you go there, and it's
Right.
more of a traditional atmosphere for pro wrestling. So that's where I really learned a lot about the basics of, TV style standard wrestling, because that's what they do there.
Sure.
So that was great. I mean, and I would say, as far as being the senior referee thing, that didn't start like right when I went there, but as I
Right.
was one of the constants there, that started to be one of the responsibilities that was put on me there. And it was nice to work with several people and really help them get where they wanted to be on the particular card. Like, oh, I want this match, or I want to do that. No problem. Here you
Right.
go. And like that was a lot of fun just to be a part of that. And it made me feel even more so like this is a job, because there's some actual work there. I'm not just showing up and being like, okay, I'm in match 3 and 6. Great. We'll have a good day. I need
You
to work
actually
with the
have some
promoter.
responsibility. Yeah. Go ahead.
100%. No, I was just saying I got to work with the promoter and the talent to make sure that they have what they need. And I really felt a little bit closer to the office in that respect because I'm doing some background work.
Yeah.
So that was a really good learning experience for me.
It's funny that you say you felt like closer to the office, because that's actually something that was like really drilled into my head by the booker at Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. You know, like sometimes we have those like phases that we go through where like we're maybe a little too friendly with like the boys and think like maybe we're like part of the locker room or something like that. And like to an extent, obviously we are, you know, we're in the ring and everything. But that was something that was really, you know, explained to me, was like, you're not one of the boys. You're part of the office. You are like part of the company, and you're a representative of the company in the ring and outside of the ring. They're just people who are coming and going through the doors, but you're going to be a constant. So you need to hold yourself to another level of like uh, respectability and responsibility.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And I think that you and I have actually had this conversation off camera about being a little closer to the office than we are to the actual locker room. And I think what you said about us being a constant is a real thing, because
Mhm.
at places like East Bay, where they have a revolving door of new talent coming in, I was always on every single show, you know, and
Sure.
not
Yeah.
everybody there was. So that was something where you have that
That
consistent
ownership.
connection.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly, with the people that are there, where it's, you know, I'm an employee of East Bay Pro Wrestling versus I am one of the talents that have come through the door this week. So that there was a
Sure.
little bit of a difference there. And I think working with companies like that to start really helped me when I started working with other similar companies like Best of the West that might have been a little bit farther away when they were first kind of starting out. They needed to have that professional presence there. So having that experience prior and being able to bring a little bit of that with me, I think really helped me and hopefully helped their company set up a good foundation for what they wanted out of their officials.
Absolutely. We've talked a lot about your early years and days in your career. Let's talk a little bit more about like the more recent times. Like, what's the most recent match that you've ref? Obviously, you know, COVID's been a thing for quite a while, so it's been a while. But
Dude, I
you know,
gotta.
you were going real hot and heavy right before COVID happened,
I'm trying to think, man, because it's so. It seems like a lifetime ago almost.
right?
Um, I would say the last one that I really remember was it was a television style show at
Hmm.
Hoodslam, and I don't remember the match, but I remember the character that I portrayed. Now,
Sure.
the disclaimer here is I understand what an official's role is in a traditional wrestling show. Please believe me
But
that I know that. But Hood Slam, as we talked about, operates a little bit different,
they
and
ask for certain things from their employees.
that they do. And the ask this time was to be Deputy Jimmy Dangle from Reno 911. And I
We
wish
gotta like put a picture of it up on here, like associated
I've
with
got it. I've
the
got it. I'll
post or
send it to you after
something.
so we can make it work. But I it's I wish I had a match for you so I could say it was between this guy and this guy, and it was great. But I just remember that experience of being that character with extremely short shorts that were very breathable and really helping the range of motion. But
Oh, I'll
that's a
bet.
separate yeah, that's a separate issue entirely. But that was one of the last shows that Hood Slam did before we're in this situation that we're in now.
Sure. Let's talk a little bit more about like matches that you've done. Do you have like a favorite that you've done? Are there any like, you know, standouts that like when you reflect back on things that you've done that like really just, oh, that was a banger. That was one that like is really gonna sit with me for like the rest of my life.
Yeah, you know, there was a really good match that I did, I want to say in 2018 for Best of the West. That it's one that I was thinking about recently. For some reason, it popped in my head, but it was Funny Bone and Eli Drake. What was the
Hmm.
match itself? And I enjoyed that match because it had a little bit of everything. It had technicality, it had really good psychology built into it. It had a really good pace to it, and the story that they told was phenomenal. It really drew in the people that were there watching it, and it made it easy to referee, and everything just kind of was smooth and just flowed, and just based on the fact that they were doing all the work for me, I didn't really have much to do. So
Sure.
I really enjoyed that one.
Those ones really stand out. You know, it's always great when you're in there with like two professionals or four, however many, but like people that really know what they're doing. And you just
Yeah.
kind of have to, you don't have to worry about anything. You don't have to tell them anything to do. You just kind of go in there and do your job. It's great. And, you know, Eli Drake and Funny Bone are definitely that.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
In your experience, sometimes we have matches that we prefer to do. Sometimes we have matches that like maybe we don't necessarily want to do. Like what style of match do you really, really enjoy? What's your favorite thing to like really sink your teeth into? If you could take your pick out of the card.
You know this, bro. I want a technical match. I want people
Yeah.
tying each other into pretzels. I want something where I have to
Yeah.
check on submissions every 2 seconds. I love the high flying flippy doos. I love all that stuff too. Don't get me wrong. I love pretty
I
much
was
any
gonna
flavor
say
of wrestling
I
there
was
is.
a little surprised when you didn't throw out Blake Christian and Alex Zane as your like standout match, but like it's not always about the flippy doos. It's a great match, but it's not always about the flippy doos. Please continue.
True. True. But and just to touch on that, I've been blessed enough to be a part of a lot of awesome matches. That was just the one that popped into my brain at the time. So
Sure.
that's what you got on the podcast. But no, but I would say I really enjoy the technical work. I like the stuff that can really draw an audience in and frankly draw me in just by physical storytelling. And
Sure.
I think that's, if I had to pick a favorite flavor of wrestling, that's what I really enjoy being a part of and watching for that matter.
Yeah, absolutely same. I mean, there's nothing quite like like in the last year we saw like Jonathan Gresham and Lee Moriarty. I don't know if you're familiar or not, but like the match they had at the Collective was just like, oh my goodness. Like
Mhm.
there's nothing like watching what two people are really capable of with just like practice and like precise execution. It's like really amazing to see what they can come up with and see how they can, like do the one-upsmanship with each other. Please go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, I think a very recent example of that one that I watched was Ciampa and Thatcher
Yeah,
working
the fight
in
pit.
the
Yeah,
fight pit.
yeah,
Thatcher brought his technical wrestling with his technical holds on every little bit of that structure. And I thought that made the match, another level just because he was able to include his style of old school technical wrestling into that.
absolutely.
So
Let's touch a little bit about the other side of the spectrum. What kind of matches, we're not here to bury anybody or anybody's
mhm.
abilities or anything like that, but what kind of matches do you not necessarily enjoy being a part of?
I'm just not a deathmatch guy, man.
Sure.
Um, that
It's not
that's
for
just not.
everybody.
Yeah, no, and I enjoy watching them, but it's like when I'm a part of it, it's one of the challenges for me where it's hard for me to separate. I'm a referee doing my job on this show to like, oh my god, that guy just got hit with a light tube, and
Yeah,
I know that about myself. So
yeah.
I will work those things if I'm booked to do so, but it's not necessarily my personal preference in what
Yeah,
I
I
would like
mean,
to work.
I'm kind of the same way in the sense that like I would never discourage people from doing it or watching it because
one Hundred
I
percent.
watch it and I enjoy it.
Mhm.
I really enjoy deathmatch wrestling from about 20 feet away.
Yeah,
But I don't want to be the person who's like medically responsible for people that are intentionally being cut open and lit on fire.
yeah, just
I'm
yeah,
not prepared for that.
yeah, for
Like I
sure.
can be if I need to be. I have
Mhm.
been in the past, but like it's just, yeah, I just want to watch and enjoy. Um,
Yeah,
yeah. Anyway,
same here.
um, in wrestling, often we have to go to some really extreme lengths to get to the things that we're going to be taking part in to get to the shows that we're
Mhm.
on. What's the farthest that you've ever actually traveled for a wrestling show?
Farthest that I've ever traveled for a wrestling show, probably LA. I think LA is farther than Vegas. Is it from
Um,
me? Or is Vegas
Actually, you
farther?
know what? LA is
Vegas is
about
farther.
6 hours and Vegas is about 9 hours. But I mean, both
Okay.
of those are quite far from the Bay Area.
Yeah, yeah. Vegas then would have to be the farthest. But
Tell
then
me a little
LA
bit
would be a
about
close
that
second.
experience. What'd you go to Vegas for?
Vegas was cool. I went there for the Cauliflower Alley Club, and the show that I was actually booked on was at the Level Up Expo over there.
Mhm.
And that was awesome. Cauliflower is like a whole nother podcast, but that was an amazing experience. I actually met you there in the casino, and we chatted up while I played some video poker, and that was good times.
Good
It was a longer drive, but I had a chance to go with AJ Kirsch actually, and him and I had never really hung out much outside of the locker room. So when you're stuck in a car with somebody for 9 hours, you're gonna get to know them.
Yeah, definitely.
And it was really cool just to hang out with him and talk about wrestling stuff and non-wrestling stuff, just life philosophy and partners and different cars we've had and just random party stories and just normal human back and forth stuff. And
Yeah.
that's what I was talking about earlier. That's the stuff I really enjoy about wrestling.
I'd be remiss. We're talking about real life, normal human stuff. It would not be a Wiggles podcast episode if we didn't talk about football. Obviously, you're rocking your Niners strip.
This was
Go
last year,
into
but
your experience with football. Tell the audience, if there was anything, at least from my observations, looking from the outside in, that
Mhm.
could rival your love of professional wrestling, it would, or maybe even beat it. It would be your love of football. So go ahead.
It's a different love. It is, but for me, I've just always been a fan of football. It's been something that's in my family, particularly the San Francisco 49ers, as you know. And I got
Raiders.
that's okay. That's all right. We all make mistakes, bud. That's no problem. We can still be friends. But I want to say it was like 2009 or 2010. The tickets for the Niners were dirt cheap because we
Mhm.
sucked at the time. It
Sure.
was like $400 for the season. So me and my buddy Ian said, "Hey, you know what? Let's do it." And I'd only been to like one football game before this,
Sure.
but once I went there, about 2 or 3 games in, similar to why I love pro wrestling, just the crowd atmosphere and the energy and the vibe and um, just the feeling of being there, I was immediately hooked on it.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of parallels in wrestling to that. Somebody scores a touchdown, there's a huge crescendo of cheers there, and that's just a great moment to be a part of. And
Yeah.
somebody, the baby face finally beats the heel after wrestling him 4 times, and same darn thing. So that's football. I'm absolutely in love with as far as sports go, and those really are the two sports that I follow the most close: pro wrestling and pro football.
It's funny that you mentioned the parallels between professional wrestling and football. Like obviously we got baby faces and heels. Like the world's greatest football heel, Tom Brady, is like going over again. We've seen all kinds of like memes and hashtags and stuff over the last day talking about like, oh, you just went and joined whatever team. I was like, hey, you guys want to win a Super Bowl? Like, how are you feeling about the potential aspirations of what our Super Bowl is going to look like this year?
I mean, honestly, these are the last two quarterbacks that I want to see play against each other. And I'll be totally transparent with you guys that are listening. It's completely selfish for me to say that because I have no reason to dislike either guy. They're both great quarterbacks. Tom Brady is probably the best ever. But I just really didn't want to see the guy that beat us last year in the Super Bowl get to the Super Bowl. And
Sure.
Tom Brady doesn't need to go to, I think, his 10th or 11th. No one needs
10th,
that many Super
10th,
Bowls.
10
It's
Super
nuts.
Bowls.
It's
One
nuts.
finger for every.
Yeah, like it's ridiculous. But either way, it's football, and I'm hooked on it just like I am any great angle in pro wrestling, and I can't wait to see the payoff coming in a
Sure.
couple of weeks. So I'm ready to go, man.
Let's swing back over into pro wrestling a little bit. Obviously, you've been at this a while now, and we talked a little bit about you like having a role as a senior referee. Are there any like people that you've taken under your wing at this point, or under your stripes? And in addition to that, who are some people that like you would attribute like your success as a referee towards? Like as far as like what kind of mentors did you have on hand, or like what kind of refs did you particularly study like through television and stuff like that? And again, like I was there for 5 seconds. You don't need to talk about me. We were just peers. Like please go ahead.
Okay, that was a really long-winded question, and it was a two-parter, which I
I
don't
don't know
think
what
was
you're talking
fair.
about.
But I'm gonna try to hit all your points. I think your first question was um, talk about a referee that I brought under my stripes, so to speak. And we already mentioned this disclaimer. We're still new. We're certainly not vets by any means, but one referee that I was lucky enough to work with was Stephen Landis. I know you've met Stephen before, I
Sure.
think, right? At Best
I've
of
worked
West a
with him
couple
on
of
a bunch
times.
of
And
shows actually. Yeah.
yeah. And then I remember
Funny
when I
Bone,
first
man. Funny Bone has got a thing for Landis. I don't
he
know
likes him.
why.
He
Yeah.
really enjoys being around him,
Yeah.
and put him to sleep. But that's a different story entirely. But Landis was really cool because when I first started working with him, he was at a very basic level of what he was doing. So he had all the standard trademarks of us when we're new. You got the deer in the headlights. You're in the wrong spot. You're getting in somebody's way. You're pissing off the boys in the back.
Sure.
And that was one of the things that he was enduring and dealing with. But to his credit, he reached out to different referees, myself, Guido, Sparky, etc. And I just happened to be on a lot of shows with him. So he would come to me for guidance on stuff. And I would always have notes for him. It was something that I tried to take the time to do because I knew how impactful that was for me when I had other referees
Yeah.
taking notes on me and helping me. So I would do that for him. And I would give him feedback and we would bounce ideas off of each other. And slowly but surely, he just got better and better. And now that kid honestly could be refereeing in any match and I think be successful at it.
Very cool.
That's how I honestly feel about Steve. And that was a lot of fun. And, you know, they say that the best way to learn is to teach, so to speak. And I wouldn't really consider myself a teacher, but having to go back to basics and remember, okay, this is what it's like to work the horseshoe. This
Yeah.
is what it's like to know where hard cam is.
Yeah.
This, you know, all that stuff, remembering that was something that really sparked it back up in my brain and really just made it a more solid fundamental understanding than I had prior just by working with him on that. And I would say another referee I'll mention was Aaliyah, who was over there at East Bay Pro. Aaliyah's not super big person. She's, I want to say 5'1", 5'2", maybe 5'3" on a good day.
Absolutely tiny human being.
Yes. So for her, what I noticed about her right off the bat was she had enough of an authoritative presence at her size to really be believable as the person in charge.
Right.
And that was so much fun to work with her because she was another person that really listened and wanted to have more conversations about it and would talk to me on our off days, like, hey, what did you think about a match here? What could I have done better there? And once again, that's all something that reminded me of the basics that sometimes one tends to overlook as they get more and more experienced at doing any job. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
definitely.
that was awesome.
It's almost like reps in the ring, but like reps for your brain.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
100%. And then I think, what was the second part? The second part of your question.
People that you've like looked up to either in person or studied, you know, via like whatever, you know, format.
For sure. So I'll start with the guys that I've worked with locally. Obviously yourself, we went to school together. We don't need to go onto that path, but I would say referee Wignall was a big one because he was at Hoodslam with me. Sparky Ballard, as you know, who is just a phenomenal referee and just known as somebody that's always been straightforward and honest and upfront in the wrestling business. And then if you look at Toby Reynolds as well, was another one that I actually watched back at, what was it? Action Empire? Action Coast?
Devil Mountain.
I mean, I watched him.
Devil Mountain becomes Action Coast, becomes East Bay.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I worked with them and they were all super, super accessible.
Yeah.
Which is what I needed as a young referee. I needed somebody that I could reach out to after my match and say, hey, I just took this really crappy video on my iPhone. I need to send it to you. Can you spend 15 or 20 minutes of your time and looking at it? And without fail, all those guys were like, absolutely. And they would stop what they're doing, watch the video, and then have commentary for me in 20 to 30 minutes.
Yeah,
and
absolutely selfless human beings. But go ahead.
Yeah, and like that was so inspiring to me. And that's what made me want to give that back. So kind of tying it back into working with Aaliyah and Steve, I had been lucky enough to have awesome referees that were always accessible. And I want to be able to give that back. So that was a really rewarding experience for me to be able to do that. And
I think that really rings true for myself as well. You know, like obviously I had Toby and Guido and Sparky, and you know, Sparky's the reason I'm in pro wrestling at all. You know, he found me in a backyard and dragged me by the scruff of my neck to a school. But like that accessibility was something that I really took to heart while I was learning under them, and is a big part of like why I created Zebra Talk and why I try to make sure that like anytime somebody reaches out to me, like you said, you know, like it leaves a huge impact and impression on us when we're at those early stages in our careers, even when we're, you know, where we are now, having somebody that is above us and, you know, like seniority and experience and stuff like that, that like we can reach out to, that will give us the time of day and will talk to us about like what it is that we need to hear about. So like it's we were very lucky to have, you know, like people that, you know, weren't full of themselves and didn't think, you know, that they didn't really need to like give back to us in any way. It was very fortunate.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that's what both of us have been lucky enough with in this business or in this job or whatever you want to call it. Just having that kind of guidance is huge. It's huge.
Yeah, definitely.
Neither of us would be anywhere near where we're at, wherever that may be, if it wasn't for other people taking the time to help us through it, because you wouldn't be able to figure this stuff out on your own.
Sure. Speaking of where you're at, you've accomplished a heck of a lot in, you know, Hoodslam, Best of the West, in the area that you're in. What kind of goals really stand out as far as things that you've been able to cross off the list in your experience so far? And what kind of goals do you still have left for yourself?
As far as goals that I've been able to cross off, I really just wanted to work outside of my bubble
Mhm.
on some great shows. I actually had an opportunity with you, GCW down in LA was
You
a
did?
standout. I did. I was there. I was there. I know the show was kind of a blur, but I'm so good at my job that I just kind of disappear into the background, and so I appreciate the compliment. Um, no, but that was definitely a goal I could check off, was just to work in a new place that was far away from me, that had the exposure that they do. That was a big goal of mine that I was happy to cross off. And
It's
yes,
funny that like that was a big goal for you because like, or not funny that it was a goal for you, but like it was a really big goal of mine to get you to Southern California for a number of years. And so it was
yes,
nice to like for both of us to be able to cross that off for at the same time with the same situation. Cause like you've done a really, 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 really good job at like becoming very well known and successful and like traveled in your area. But
thank
like
you.
I it it's always kind of disappointed me that like more people don't know who you are, and not in a like, oh, you're not doing things right or
No, I
anything.
get it.
Like it's not about you putting yourself over. That's not our job in the business. But like everybody who knows who you are and everybody that works with you in the Bay Area, in Vestal West, wherever it is that you go, like your quality shines through, your professionalism shines through. And I've been so eager for the rest of the wrestling world to know how competent and capable you are as a referee. So it was a real joy for me to finally, like see you, when I saw you walking up that first, few minutes when we were in LA, just like, yes, he's here. We're doing it. This is good. I'm so
Yes.
happy. But go ahead, please continue.
No, I mean that I'm just super grateful for the fact that you wanted to get me out there and do that, because sometimes I've been very lucky, but sometimes you can feel like you are spinning your wheels, doing the same thing at the same
Sure.
spot. And I'm confident in my abilities, but I did work within we'll say 100-mile radius,
Yeah.
and that was about it. So it was a big goal of mine to get out of that area and go work for a reputable company with talent that I never worked for before,
Sure.
in a really high energy environment. And anybody that knows GCW knows that is a high energy environment.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and and that was awesome. As far as my goals moving forward, really once things start to even out on our world scale that we're on right now, I
Sure.
really just want to get back into it on a regular basis,
Sure. Of
and then
course.
really even expand more. Do the LA shows, go up to Washington, really handle more of the West Coast, and just work with different companies that I haven't worked with before. And I've had some conversations with people here and there during this time of relative slowness in the business. And that's been productive. So I look forward to really hitting the ground running, and just getting out of my bubble more would be the goal, more than anything
Very
else.
cool. Maybe we can get you on a show with an IFB.
Let's do it. Let's
Yeah.
do it.
A headset, for those of you who don't know what that is.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
a whole new beast for a lot of referees who haven't had a chance to use it yet. So
I
it'll
need that
be,
experience, brother. I really
yeah,
do.
man.
Like I've gotten really good, like working with the baseball manager signs coming from the timekeeper, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
It's
But yeah,
16, 12 minutes
yeah,
to go.
exactly.
Sure.
But I would love to get some experience doing that. So I guess that's another more concrete, minute goal, is to work somewhere where I can work with the headset. You're absolutely right.
Sure. We're kind of winding down our time here, and I like to, at the end of these interviews, give my guests an opportunity to talk about like shows that they've been on that maybe people haven't really been able to see, or that they should give another look at. If there's any matches out there on like YouTube or anything like that that you think people should really take a look at, this is the opportunity for you to like talk about your social media and things like that. And particularly if there are any wrestlers that you think people should really give another look at, this is that time. So please go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, thanks for having me, first of all. As far as my social plugs, it's pretty simple. It's just Facebook, and on Twitch, I'm at Mr. Wiggles Live. Really, that's all I've got. I don't have the Instagrams and the Twittergrams and all the other things that you always pester me to get.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm working on myself. Okay, I am. But yeah, if you guys want to connect to my video games, please hit me up on Twitch. That's another big passion of mine that we didn't really have a chance to talk about. But I'm always down to game and hang out with you guys, and it's a great way to get to know people and kind of bond over something that you both know. So that'd be awesome if you guys want to hit me up on Twitch. As far as companies that I think you should check out, I think you would really enjoy. At least giving Hoodslam a shot. Check them out on Twitch as well. Twitch.tv/Hoodslam. They've got some really cool content on there. There's some really funny matches, some really good wrestling matches, and maybe it'll give you kind of a feel for what we were talking about, because we were talking about it in kind of abstract terms. So it would at least give you some kind of a frame of reference for this conversation anyways. Other than that, I would say Best of the West is another awesome company to check out. I've had a chance to work with them. They're local here to the West Coast. They have a lot of awesome talent come in the door, and there's a lot of up and coming talent that have worked on that show. So they're mostly on on YouTube, I found. So go check them out at YouTube. They're Best of the West Wrestling on YouTube, and they've got some great content on there as well. As far as wrestlers that I think you guys and girls should check out, it would definitely be this guy on my shirt. I think.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably like one of the top people on both of our lists as far as like why doesn't the world just absolutely worship him already.
He is just an incredible wrestler, and of all the people that I've been lucky enough to work with, his matches are almost universally always bangers. Just the way that guy works, it's just phenomenal. It's fun to watch, and I highly suggest you check out Steven Tresario 100%. Absolutely. The other one would have to be, and you probably know what I'm going to say here, would have to be Kenny K.
Yeah,
Kenny K is somebody that, once again, is known locally in this area. He's been in Washington a little bit, but the things that this guy can do, he embodies that phrase that we all hear about. Man, they could have a good match with a broomstick.
Yeah,
he could. He's just an incredible wrestler. He can work, with any style of wrestler, and once again, put on absolute bangers. And the stuff that guy can do in the ring is unreal, and it's just so easy for him.
I was going to say, not just, like he can have a good match with anybody, but like it's another level when you find somebody that is consistently doing things that you like have never seen before. Like we see so much wrestling, we see so many people doing the same things or doing things that we haven't seen in a while or rarely or something like that. But like Kenny comes up with things that like you would have never even considered before. So like I couldn't agree more. Go ahead.
And what's so crazy about that, not to get on Kenny for too long here, but he'll bounce ideas off me in the car ride on the way to something like, what if I did a super flippy floppy do off this one rope and then turned it into a Rana and then did this, this, and this? I'm like, oh, that would be cool. And then the dude does it like an hour later. He does it like he's done it his whole life. He might practice it one time before the show, but then he just does it. And he's like, oh, I think it was pretty good. I'm like, bro. So he's one
I actually
of those guys,
heard Steven talking about Kenny once, saying, like there's so many things that he'll do with Kenny that he would never try with anybody else, because there's a lot of things that Kenny will do that like he's never done before, because he thinks up of it, like you said, like an hour before the show. But he's never felt worried that he knows that if there's anybody who's going to be able to execute it and execute it safely, it's Kenny K. So.
Yeah, and I think he's just one of those people within the business that I think has earned the trust of just about anybody that knows him and can come up and say, okay, we're going to do 16 backflips off the third rope, and then everyone's like, okay, where do you need me?
Okay, cool, sounds good.
So I think he's earned that, and between Steven and Kenny K, I think those are both talents that I wish more people had the pleasure of watching or working with, for sure.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast here today, Wiggles. I really appreciated your time. I appreciate, always being able to get to chop things up with you. I appreciate the countless times you've let me crash on your couch and hang out with Jenny,
no problem, bro.
Who is the, like world's most adorable dog. It's unfortunate.
Kenny,
absolutely.
On the podcast.
We need Jenny.
Oh, might have to delete that, huh?
Maybe not.
Maybe we'll just call it over by the time we get out of the
chair. Anyway, let's say hi to Jenny.
Hi, Jenny. Can we put a censored graphic up? Can you find one?
I'll see if I can figure it out.
Thank you. Hi, Jenny. Thank you, Zebra Talk. This is a lot of fun, Odie. I appreciate you having me on for the podcast.
Oh man.
I got a red tint problem on my camera now.
All right. I'm gonna wind things down. That was the best outro I could have ever hoped for. If
You're
you
welcome.
would like to support the Zebra Talk podcast, the Zebra Talk Fund, please head over to prowrestlingtees.com/Zebra Talk. We've got lots of sweaters, shirts, hats, COVID masks. Hopefully, one of these days we can talk Willow's into actually getting a piece of merch. If you would like to follow us on Instagram or Twitter, it's Zebra Talk 123. You can also send an application to the Zebra Talk Fund or request to be on the show yourself if you're a referee. The email is zebratalk123@gmail.com. If you're not a part of Zebra Talk yet and you are a referee, first off, why? Why? Come on.
Come on.
We have almost 1,000 members. We're in every country where wrestling takes place. We're on every continent where human beings live, other than that cold one way south. Please find me on any of the socials. I'm Robert Odie Brown on Facebook. Add me. I'll get you into Zebra Talk and we'll get you involved and, get you started on networking and learning from other people all over the world. If you want to find me on Twitter or Instagram, it's Odie1Canody. And yeah, thank you very much for joining us here today. And Wiggles, thank you so much for being here today, for dedicating a little bit of your time to this and for that amazing.
For sure. I got you. I always do. Thanks again for tuning in today, guys. Thank you, Zebra Talk. And like you said, if you're not a part of it, go join up. It's an awesome resource. And yeah, just thanks again. I appreciate your time and for everything you do for the refereeing world of professional wrestling, Odie. Thanks, buddy.
Absolutely, brother. Thank you, folks.
Take care.